Hello friends, Amy here coming to you from my kitchen today. We are trying something new and fun and exciting. I have pulled out our new multi-cooker, which I am so stoked about. It does so many great things. You can watch the video on all the product things that it does. But today I am making some sous vide pork bites. Now, when I talk about pork bites, I'll tell you about those in a second. I just want to get it started. So I'm going to turn it to sous vide. I'm going to tell it that I want 3 hours. You can take it out at some point, but I like having it 3 hours. Even if I take it out early, at least I know it's still going to run. And I'm going to turn it up to 155 degrees, which is where I kind of like my pork, and we'll talk about why that's okay later. And I'm going to hold down the button, and it's going to hit run. So I'm going to put the lid on so that it has time to warm up. What this is doing is it's basically warming up the water to 155 degrees. So if you've ever looked at sous vide cooking, you will know that it is a set temperature for a set amount of time and always gives you a perfect result. So what I have today is a pork loin, just that I bought. It was on sale. So a good price for a pork loin, this was a good price yesterday, is about $4.45 a kilo, $4.50, which is about $1.95 a pound. A great price for a pork loin, a great price. That's also a great price for a whole chicken, but we're gonna talk about pork loin today. So I'm gonna get this package opened and we're gonna show you how we can utilize this $20 chunk of meat into probably at least 3 to 4 meals for my family. So this particular piece of meat was about 10 pounds. It was 4.8 kilos, so about 10 pounds. So again, this is gonna make, like, it's taking up my whole cutting board. I love this. So I'm gonna start just at this end because it has, it's actually, as it unfolded, it's got quite a bit here. I'm gonna just cut some of this off and then I'm gonna put it into a bowl because one of the things that I love to eat and that we love, it's kind of an appetizer around here, are pork bites. So I can see that if you look at my hunk of meat, I've got one end that is quite a bit bigger than the other. If you think about the fact that this came off an animal, that's actually a really logical conclusion to come to. So I'm gonna hunk off probably about this much. And I'm going to just set that aside for a minute. And then I'm gonna look at this from the underside and see where things are at here. Okay, so I actually, Amy used the right size knife. I'm gonna pull out a bit bigger of a knife and I'm gonna look at, I can probably turn this into 3 pork loins for my family. Now I could cut this into pork chops. I happen to know we already have some pork chops in the freezer. So if you didn't have pork chops, this would make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 nice sized pork chops, which again, if you have a family of 4 or 5, that would be a couple of meals because these are, nobody's gonna eat a whole one of these pork chops. Well, they might if you've got teenagers. Now, I actually don't love a lot of this extra fat, and because when I'm putting them in the freezer, I wanna get them as ready to cook as possible, especially now that I have the sous vide. I want to be able to go straight from the freezer to thaw it out and then be able to put it right into the sous vide, right in the vacuum seal. So I'm actually gonna take off as much of the fat as I can here, and I'm gonna take off the silver skin. So the silver skin is just this little tendon right on the top. So you see this on tenderloin and you see it on these pork loins. It's actually quite chewy when you cook it. So you wanna get your knife in and just under it, you wanna get as little of the actual meat as possible, but if you get your knife just underneath it, it's gonna actually come off really quite nicely, and it allows you to prepare this. It's a little shiny. That's how you can tell it's called the silver skin. You can see it's a little shiny there. And this is gonna just prepare this to be a little bit nicer and a little bit less chewy as it cooks and then as you're serving it. So I'm gonna just get this all sliced up now. Okay, so I have my pork all chunked up and I have put it in here in one of our reusable bags. I think that's all they're called. Like a reusable Ziploc bag, basically. So one of the things about sous vide, I added a little bit of olive oil just because a little bit of oil never hurts. And then I'm going to shake in some of our rotisserie seasoning. What I love about this is just it's so flavorful and it's so powdery that it's just going to amalgamate with all of that pork so easily and so well. So I'm going to just massage it down into the bottom like I was doing a marinade. And then the goal is going to be to get all of the air out. So once my sous vide is up to temperature, I am going to show you how I get all of the air out and why that's important when it comes to sous vide. Up to temperature, and I am just going to submerge the bag. Now, you want to get as much contact as you can with the water and the meat. So I am just going to put this in. Utensil. The water's hot, so you got to kind of do this so that you don't get burned. And then I'm going to just sort of make sure it's flat in the bottom. As I'm doing that, all of the air is going to come out. The air acts as a conductor between the water and the meat, so you don't want any air in there. Plus, it makes it float, so we don't want that. So as it's in there, I'm just going to make sure it's nice and sealed and all the air is out. Now that meat is nice and flat in the bottom of there. And I'm going to hit go. It's going to go for about 2 hours. It could go to 4, but I think in 2 hours it's going to be where I want it to be for the purposes that I want. And I'll show you the next steps. Okay, our meat is ready to come out. I love that I can just stand up the lid. What I'm most excited to do with these is to press them up a little bit and put them in the air fryer. So before I do that, I want to just take them out of the bag. Make sure I move it so you can see it here. I'm going to take them out of the bag and we're going to just dry them out a little bit, just enough to kind of get a lot of this excess moisture off. Okay, these didn't really shrink up, which is super interesting to me. I think most of the time pork bites get really small. So these are some pretty decent size chunks of meat. You can sort of see in the bag all of that liquid. That's all just the pork juice and all the goodness. I can smell the rotisserie seasoning that we put in. I'm just going to stand that back up there. Okay, so I'm going to dry these off. And then I have just a tray with some panko. And then I just have an air fryer tray. So I'm going to just, doesn't need a lot on it. Just enough to give the little outside edge a little crisp. So I've just got a little light layering of panko on there, and I'm gonna toss these in the air fryer for probably about 8 minutes, just enough to sort of crisp the outside and give them a nice crunchy bit of a pork bite.